So, here we are. Here we are, born to be kings. We're the princes of the universe. That's a terrible singing rendition of that song. I am all sorts of out of tune right now. Okay, campaign cartographer. Using templates. From here on, we'll look at technique methods which, while non-essential, give you more options and flexibility with your map making. Okay, about the shields. The bottom window contains two types of shield. Those on the left are made of multipolys. The two on the box are composites, made up of many squares or diamonds. By changing the color of the individual squares, you can create your own pattern. The shields on the right are examples of what you can make. Yeah, there should be some editing on some of this book here. Okay, so their shield maker. Their shield maker seems to be designed specifically as if it were different forms of grid. Like if you've ever done it, I should be able to make a map of the board, a printable map that I could potentially export and make a simple downloadable PDF that other people could use to print and play the game. Now, could I do the same thing? Like, remember I talked about potentially using this as a way to lay out circuit patterns. Could I use this as a means of outlaying? So I could use circuit patterns and simple text to do the, but I'm still not familiar with it enough to be able to figure out how to make custom. I need to be able to focus my words better. I'm not doing great with this right now. It's too many carbohydrates in my diet lately. All right, so the map making software. Okay, so I started out with the idea that the Access Granted board game, my Cyberpunk themed board game, is potentially something that, as the board itself is designed on a cityscape, I may be able to use I may be able to make an overland map, exchanging things like forest and rivers with skeletonized glowing. Then from there, what I need to do is be able to lay down hexagonal tiles that are sort of that's kind of one of the things I need to figure out, is how to stack those things in the right way. But I may be able to lay out certain pattern cards, and it sounds like I can put legends and titles and stuff like that. So if I can do a legend, which is going to have a lot of words with some simple symbols on it, if I make multiple legends and make each one a specific card for the gameplay, I might be able to build a file that you can print out the game with. And the shields could be the player tokens. I don't know that I need to use the shields. I could use a round pattern or something like that. But just kind of familiarizing myself with some of the features and figuring out what I can and can't put down on a map. Because in the end, basically, all a board game board is a map of the playing area. So if I can make a set of symbols that I can use for board game design elements, I could potentially make it possible for me, once I've established an inventory of symbols, I should be able to, from there on out, just slap together a couple different board games whenever I want to come up with a new idea for a game. Because here's the thing. I started out with imagining what I could do with the Cyberpunk board game. And then looking at the cobblestone roadways, I got to thinking, there was that game I came up with, the Modular Terrain game, where it's essentially a long set of chutes and ladders. Only instead of ladders, it's a pathway, and instead of a chute, it's a pathway. And you have it themed on the 4 elements, and each of the elements, each player has a token that can be one of the elements, and each of the elements has set number of paths, and each tile has pieces of those paths. So you might have the middle section of a path for Earth on one tile, and you connect it to another tile, and now you've got a longer path for Earth. If you're the Earth player and you land on that path, you can ride it all the way to wherever it ends, like a chute in Chutes and Ladders. Now, I think the only other feature that I need to do is the items you're seeking. So you have these tiles that you can lay face down, and when you turn over a tile, it's your draw of a tile. You turn over a tile, and it might have a gem on it, and whoever gets that gem first adds it to their awards. So you get to that tile, you're on that tile, you own that tile. As soon as you move off of that tile, you pick that tile up, and it is now part of your winnings. And whoever has the most by the end of the game wins. Now, that simplicity of that game is pretty straightforward. And all it requires is tiles with rows of, or patterns of, earth, air, fire, and water on them, player tokens with earth, air, fire, and water on them, and some tokens with a secret gem on them. You don't know what it is until it turns over, and when it's there, it's the reward you have to seek out. Now, there's some rules you have to build around where you can place those tiles. You don't want it so that anybody can just lay it down right next to their token. But at any rate, so this should work for that too. I could use cobblestone roadways, river symbols, and the cloud one I might have to make my own symbols for. And fire I might have to make my own symbols for. But if I can just do that, I can make this a playable game. And I can make it as a file that I could potentially export as a PDF and make it readily available for people. I'm kind of curious to see what formats I can save the images in, like the finished maps. If I can save them in PDF, that would be great. if I can save them in a format like a large JPEG or a PNG file, then I can easily take care of that and convert them to PDF files if I want. I'm curious enough to see if I can use what I make in these map programs. If I can use what I make in these map programs to port them over into some other video editing software, not video, image editing software, and make individual icons. Because what I'm debating as to whether or not this might be something I can use for designing cards. Because I know I can get card games made relatively easily. But the other thing I'm curious about is online gaming tabletops like Roll20. The system for Roll20 lets you build custom decks of cards. And I might be able to make decks of cards with artwork created in the... Imagine I'm going to get it done really in a reasonable amount of time, but I've got to work. I wish I didn't have to work. I wish I could just say I'm taking the week off. I'm going to build some games online and make them available to people in quarantine and then just move on. But I don't see that happening. So I'm going to see what I can do in my spare time, see if I can bang out a couple of designs for very simple game structures and see how well I can translate that into other formats. The Cyberpunk game, I think, still is best done as a print and play game. I think I still want to use the pattern of doing a print and play, sort of like a donation, like a freeware. But I'm very curious to see what I could achieve with making board games and card game elements in MapMaker. Because that's essentially like a board game. Like I said, a board game is essentially just the map of your playing area. Monopoly is a square map of different territories. Chutes and Ladders is a map of a roadway through a territory. Yeah, it's a very winding map, but it's still just a map that you follow. With mile markers along the path. It's just that each space is a mile. That sort of thing. Like, this could potentially be a means of making a whole bunch of different board games. And that realization came to me when I was thinking about the fact that my Cyberpunk game is based off of the idea that the board is a picture of a section of a city. And then you just lay the path that a person moves over top of that. Like, it was designed to be a map. And so as I thought about it more, I don't think there's any part of this that shouldn't be possible. I just think it might be a little bit of a learning curve on how to bend the rules of the system to make it do... I mean, this is meant to be overland maps. I don't see any evidence suggesting that it's ideally designed for city design, because it's not really meant to be a city design software. They have an expansion pack which supposedly makes that possible. But again, like the last time I talked about it, the point I came across at a certain time was it looks like there is some variant for things like the character creator and the the perspective. But everything else looks like it's just like, yeah, I don't think you could do that sort of thing right there with it. Although there's a part of me looking at it going like, there's no reason why I couldn't do that. Now that I think about it. I mean, all you're doing is you're making all your elements from a 2-point perspective. As an artist, that's one of the things we learn very early on, is that making 2-point perspective is, and actually this doesn't even look like a full 2-point perspective. It doesn't taper at the edges like it would. This is literally like, instead of just doing a rectangle wall of a room, this is a elongated trapezoid wall and a different elongated trapezoid wall and a different trapezoidal wall for the floor, and they're just laid out. It's basically one, and you spin into 3 diamonds that tile together to form the hexagon. All you have to do is elongate some of those diamonds to irregular trapezoids. Vocabulary for this system. Yeah, I think I could probably do a perspective. Looking at the image of what that perspective file is, I could probably do that reasonably well. Okay, so that one's not too hard to do. Okay, so this one, that's very different. What's that? This is looking at, so what are we looking at here? Creating perspective symbols. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look impossible to do this. The cliff faces might be hard, but not impossible. It's 460. It says on 460 they discuss ways to make perspective stuff. So, I mean, at this point, like the dimensions, the perspective images that I could make, I might be able to achieve, but it's going to take a fair amount of time and effort to get the artwork right. Whereas some of the beauty of this basic software is that it comes pre-established. Okay. So I think the other aspect of some of this, and maybe this has a feature that lets you do that, but it seems like some of what makes this work easier for designers is the ability of 2 pieces put next to each other to meld. So say you have a middle of, and when you lay that down, it needs to blend into the next piece. So the alignment has to go just right. Yeah, so that might be a little. So what does it say? That was 466 and 462. 466 is creating the tiles for it. 6, come on. My hands are way too dry from washing them too much today. Creating perspective symbols. Metric form in CC2 Pro is all that would seemingly be required to make this work. To create a freestanding perspective. I think the other thing is they let you label an object with front and back view in perspective. Whereas if I just used basic illustration symbols in CC2, it just increases the workload. Making a Perspective Pro symbol. Perspective Pro isn't true 3D. It is specific angle view of your created realms. Is it glue or something on the book? Come on. Not that anybody's watching right now anyway. Yeah, this is definitely high quality content. Pick at the sticker on the book. Yeah, that's the way to do it. All right, so making perspective. So it's not true 3D. Symbols are specific angled views. Isn't as hard as it might seem. The tutorial makes certain assumptions about your abilities with CC2 Pro, but the tools provided in Perspective Pro make creating that angled view easy. We're going to make a simple wagon. I think the other thing that's sort of interesting here is, as you really look at the demo of how they're doing that, when they use perspective, the grid that you can line things up in perspective is at angles. Whereas the grid for designing things and laying them out in the campaign cartographer is not on angle. So making a map in campaign cartographer base form, you're stuck with a horizontal and vertical line orientation. You do not get that kind of angle bit. Although it does suggest at one point that you might be able to use hexagons. So if I used hexagons, that may be the biggest difference, I think, is the, come on, where is the page that talks about the gridding and hexagons? Can I use hexagons or not? Hex grid, come on. Freaking pain in the ass. Okay, hex grids. First map, mapping land, mountains, rivers, settlements, no. Forest and vegetation. Zoom to text. Multi-line text, outline text, the symbol catalogs. I'll have to look at that a little bit more. Grid overlays. I think that's 51. Finishing touches. Finishing grid overlays. Actually, you know, my experience so far with playing with this suggests that it may be a bitmap style grid, but it's a small enough grid that I think I can, it shouldn't matter overly much to setting a diagonally shaped object, because it's not like a snap to grid where the grid is the size of the symbol that you're using. The grid so far that I've seen, that it moves and it will let me do that. So if I want to put a it's sort of like a free-form placement of pieces. If I wanted to build the city wall, it would be easy to do it wrong and not get it perfectly lined up because it doesn't snap to grid like that. So since it doesn't snap to grid, it suggests to me that I'm going to be able to do a diagonal wall with vertical sides and then line up another one and just adjust it so that the two edges mesh well. Or at least make sure the one that goes on the top side of that image covers the thing that it overlaps. That should do everything I would need it to do. Make a perspective system. I'm pretty sure I can make a what do they call it? Their card modeling. Their geomorph dungeons diorama. I can make diorama pieces. I can make so where was that geomorph dungeon? I should be able to do that too. This is all like I should be able to do the city maps from a greater distance. I should be able to do small towns with closer in look. I'm even thinking that I might be able to use this to build maps of terrain and structures that I can then import as the basic images of video games. So I could, in video games, you have to have certain things be interactive in a certain way. So what I'm thinking will probably have to happen is you do the shape of the floor, and then you have objects like walls built as a separate layer that you bring into the game design software separately and make those objects that you bump into. So I might be able to build some very simple video game layouts in this and port them over to be interactive in a video game software suite. Heck, I might be building this to make a somehow other playable demo. There's some potential here. Some uses that I don't think it's meant for, but I could probably do some interesting things with. I think the biggest one right now. So what do we have? We have map making. Then we have importing into CC2 Pro is probably the next thing I need to look at. Clipboard, exporting and importing with the clipboard. Menus. Okay, so next we have character creator. Character Artist Pro introduction. City Design Pro. Ease to build it in the basic format. So I'm pretty sure I can work around the limitations of it. All right, so we're coming up on 40 minutes. That's kind of where I am tonight. I'm trying to work on a few other projects too. Tried to get some errands done today, but apparently my bank has closed most of its branches. I have to go find another one in order to get my money taken care of in a way that I can pay the things I need to pay for. All right, so I need to see if I can get that worked out tomorrow, but I'm also seeing if I can work on a couple of projects to get something released while people are still in quarantine. Give them stopping by, I guess. Until tomorrow, I guess. Take care and have a good night. Buenos noches. 再见.